Hello everyone, I am Apurva and welcome to my series 100 Days 100 Problems, where I solve your Power Apps challenges and turn them into working solutions. Let's read our today's challenge. I've been tasked with creating a resource tracker Canvas app with a SharePoint list backend. Essentially, every staff starts off with 100% time. Then their BAU is deducted. So maybe staff A has a 50% of workload. So staff A is 100 minus 50, which is 50. Then I want to add projects and select resource. So maybe I want to do project C and add staff A for 15% of time. So now they are left with 35. Where it gets tricky is it needs to understand that technically if project ends, then they regain the project time, that is add 15 back to 35. For this, first we'll create a SharePoint list for employees. Then we'll start by creating relevant columns like employee, their BAU time, and then their available time. Now let's add the SharePoint list to the Power Apps. Then we'll add a vertical gallery to show all the employees in our list. But before that, I'm going to create a collection to store all the data from our SharePoint list. Then we will use this collection on the items property of the gallery. Now let's add a form to create entries and store the data into our SharePoint list. Before we proceed, I'm just going to change the columns from 3 to 1, and we also don't require title, so I'm just removing that. Then I'm going to make sure that the field for employee name is set to display name. Now, as per the requirement, any employee will start off with 100% of their time. So I'm going to create a variable to store this 100. Now let's set the default value for the available time, which will be start of time minus BAU time. Now this BAU time is going to come from the user. And for start of time, we have already set it to be 100. And then let's also make sure that the display mode for this field is view only. Finally, we need a submit button. Let's add that. To submit the form, we'll use submit form function. And most importantly, don't forget to set your form to the new mode. Now let's go ahead and add a new entry. I'm going to add BAU time as 50. So my available time should be 100 minus 50, which is 50. Now every time we create a new record, we need to ensure to get that latest data. So for that, we are going to refresh our data source and then create our collection again to get the latest data. Finally, we also need to reset our form so that the form is all ready in case we need to add a new entry. We'll add the same reset form formula on the on visible property of the screen. Now let's test this. So far we have added 2 records in the backend that can be seen in the gallery. So let's format this gallery correctly to see the values. Now I'm going to add few more records to our employee list. Now with that, we have completed first part of the requirement. For our second part, we need to assign resource to a project. So for that, we need a project list. First, we'll create a lookup column to assign an employee to a project. Then we'll create a column for project name. Then we need another column to store the allocation of any resource to a particular project. Finally, we will add the start date and the end date for a project. Now let's connect the project list to our Power Apps. Again, we'll create one more collection to store all the data from our project list. From the first screen, we'll copy this gallery and paste it on the second screen. Similar to our first screen, we'll also add a form here. This time it will be for project list. Let's get rid of title as we are not using that field. Also make sure your form is in the new mode. Now I'm going to create a variable which will store the value that I'm selecting in this gallery. And with the help of this variable, we are going to set the default value for the employee name in this form. Make sure that the display mode for the employee name is set to view so that no one can change the value for the employee name. For allotted time, we need to make sure that the allocation of any resource cannot be greater than its available time. For instance, Ryan's available time is 40. So his allocation time cannot be greater than 40. For us to make sure that the user is not entering a value that is greater than the available time, first we'll capture the user input time into a variable. Then we'll add a logic to see whether the value in this variable is greater than the available time. If it is, then we are going to reset this text input control so that user can enter another acceptable value. Now let's test our logic. So our selected employee is Ryan and his available time is 40. So anything above 40 is not acceptable. Then we need a submit button to submit our records. First we'll use submit form to submit the record into the project list. Then we will use patch function to update the available time for the employee in the employee list. So the available time will be current available time minus allotted time. Then we need to reset our form, and then finally we also need to fetch the latest data in the employee list and the project list. For that, we'll refresh the data source and then create our collections again to get the latest data. We are going to add a logic for the display mode of this button, which is if the allotted time is greater than the available time, then the display mode of this button will be disabled. Now let's test our form. Now I've set the allotted time to be 40, which means once I hit submit, Ryan's available time should be 0. Also, let's double check our SharePoint list. As you can see, employee is empty. It did not get patched because the data type for this column is person or group, and SharePoint requires the data to be patched in a certain format. So let's see how we can do that. Let's test this one more time. Before that, I'm going to delete this record with the empty employee name. This time we are testing for Michael and the allocated time is 5. His available time is 10. So now after this record, his available time should be 5. Let's see. Now that we have completed this functionality, let's move on to the third part of today's challenge. Basically, what we need to do is, let's say the project is ending today. Whatever is the allocated time for that project, that needs to go back in the available time for that particular resource. For this, I'm creating a scheduled flow which will run once every day. You can decide the time when you want this flow to run. Our next step will be to get all the items whose end date is today. We will also add a filter query, so it's only getting those records whose end date is equals to today's date. Now before testing ahead, let's create a record whose end date is 5th Feb, which is today's date. Now once I have the record with today's end date, I'm going to get the allocated time for this project, and I'm also going to get the available time of this resource that is been assigned to this project. Finally, we are going to update the available time for this resource, which is the allocated time of the project plus its current available time. Now let's test our flow for our employee Pam. Her allocated time is 25 and her available time is 40. So as soon as the flow ends, her new available time should be 65. And with that, we have completed today's challenge. I'll just clean the app a bit and we'll see the final look. Here is the final look. I've created a gallery to show all the employee name, their title, the projects that they are working on, and at the end we have the available time for the employee. We also have a search bar at the top to search any employee. Then I've added the new employee form on the same screen to add the new employees with their BAU time and hit submit. Then I have a new project button which navigates to the new project screen. Here we have the project details, project name, end date, allocated time. Similarly, we have a form here to assign any employee to a project or to add a new project. I've also highlighted the available time for any employee that is selected so we can see how much time is available for us to assign to them. And that's it. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe.